like to ask you something. How to make your faith perfect? You have dreams and you want them to come true, but you think you don't have enough faith. Or at least you think your faith is not strong enough. Because you see people around you being blessed, receiving God-sent gifts, enjoying many different opportunities and a good life under the sun. And at the same time, you are living a life that you would give anything to leave. You don't know what is wrong with you. You can't see what other people do that make everything so right for them. If this is a thought that continually bothers you, I hope this message will be significant to you. This is the sixth message on faith, and we have already seen how to please God. Faith works. God has made you a promise. God is not ashamed of you, and the art of waiting on God. You can find all these messages on our website on the front page. Just click on the ANCF TV box and you'll be able to watch all the videos our church has been posting these past few weeks. Today we will take a look at another relevant aspect of faith, which is one of the least known of them all, the purposeful faith. Let's take a look at verses 23 to 31 of chapter 11 of the book of Hebrews. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell, after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Have you ever spent some time reading Moses' story in the book of Exodus? Well, it's a great story. It says Moses was born when his people were enslaved in Egypt. Not a good time to be born, right? His parents rescued him from Pharaoh's cruel law that decreed all male Hebrew children were to be killed. Both faith and trouble entered Moses' life at a very early stage. His parents defied the mighty king of Egypt in the hope of preserving a future for God's people. Then, what happened next? Well, Moses was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter and grew up in the royal court. Okay, so here's where you think, that's life. Is there a greater blessing than being adopted by the daughter of the most powerful king on the planet? Well, yes, it was great, but here's the thing, every blessing we receive has a meaning. Moses' parents were perhaps thinking of preserving their son's life, which in itself is a big deal. They were slaves with no way to offer their son a good life. But the story tells us it was not just that. Through troubles and sorrows and fears and uncertainties and anxieties, the same kinds of things that happen to all of us even though we don't live in a king's palace, Moses was eventually brought to the truth. What truth? The truth that he was God's servant who would liberate his people from Pharaoh's slavery? Well, no, not yet. Rather, the beginning of a troubling feeling that says there is something wrong and which makes us curious to investigate what it is. Because this is the first nudge of faith in action. Remember what happened to Moses. He began to suspect that he didn't belong where he grew up. People were suffering around him, and well, this got his attention more than the luxury of the palace. Then problems, not solutions, came into his life. He killed the man. His fellow Hebrews accused him. Pharaoh persecuted him, and he fled. Eventually, Moses found out where he had come from, and after a long time in the desert, he set out to liberate God's people from their oppressive taskmasters. He began to understand that faith in God implies a relationship with God. He saw this brings a life fulfilled with purposes. He became able to see the future. He looked ahead to the far-reaching purposes of God when the true King of Kings would come to set free the world from all kinds of slavery. And it all started with just a small and helpless baby placed in a papyrus basket coated with tar and pitch and set amongst the reeds along the bank of a river. You today, just like Moses 3,500 years ago, need to carry the same principle of faith. The faith that looks to the future and knows that God has planned something much better than anything we could accomplish for ourselves. I know what you're thinking now. You are not Moses. But that doesn't mean your faith cannot be perfect. Okay, I see. Here's what you think. Moses was a nice guy, called and sent by God to fulfill nothing less than God's plans on earth. He was chosen by God Himself to perform a monumental job, to act bravely in all challenges. Well, Moses was a hero, a man without moral flaws, without emotional relapses or physical restrictions, without spiritual daydreams. He was perfect and you were not. Well, this is wrong. Your faith is perfect simply because there is no such thing as imperfect faith. Faith always brings perfection. Okay, now you think you better stop watching this video. You think I live in another world. I can see the reality around us with all this crisis and threats of illness and economic shutdown, depression, sadness, despair, and uncertainty about the future. But please, bear with me. Let me explain to you another aspect of faith we haven't seen thus far. Together with believing and trusting and obeying and waiting, faith carries within itself another essential element: perfection. In the Hebrew Bible, the word perfect is tamin, and its basic meaning is complete or entire or even blameless. This is the case of Noah, for instance. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. You see, it does not mean Noah never made a mistake or a wrong choice. Instead, the Bible tells us that Noah had learned how to be mature in his relationship with God. That's because the secret is not to figure out a magic formula to prevent us from committing sins, because it will never happen. We are all sinners, and we will all keep on sinning, no matter how sad it may be and how awful the consequences in your lives. The secret is knowing how to be close to the one who can forgive our sins. Noah learned to be close to God. The New Testament idea of perfection is not different. The word teleos suggests that we should become utterly committed to living God's way of life. For this reason, when we say that we can make our faith perfect, we're not saying that perfection is to be achieved by hard moral effort until every wrong action, thought, and motive had been ironed out of our character. No, of course not. As most of us are all too aware, that's a journey without end, because nobody can do that. The biblical idea of perfection is not a burden, but a gift. We receive it from God every time we exercise faith. It's what we get when everything has been put into place for the final great purpose to be achieved: God's redemption for the whole created world. And here is where your faith makes sense. Yes, I'm talking about your faith in the whole process of restoration of the entire creation. Many people have a wrong understanding of faith. They think faith works like, say, Harry Potter's magic wand. If you are able to use it properly, combined with some correct pronunciation of some magical words in Latin, then you will be able to have everything you want right away. Unfortunately, or better yet, fortunately, it doesn't work that way. Even if that were the case, you, with all your limitations and difficulties in seeing the future consequences of your actions, would probably be getting into a lot of trouble. Incidentally, this is what happens with Harry Potter himself, who, even though being the hero of the story, ends up getting involved in countless problems precisely because he had improperly used his magic wand. What is a weak kind of faith then? It is faith without a definite purpose. Since the purpose of the mustard seed, for instance, is to one day become a tree, it being small is not a problem because it is not weak, it has a purpose. And once you see that, you also understand that there is no problem in wishing for God's blessings. You can surely dream of a good job, of a new car, a house for your family, a good marriage, a good relationship with your children, good friends, and great getaway days. God never said these things were illegitimate, but does your faith have a purpose? Notice, I'm not saying that your dreams are purposeless. I'm just asking you what their purpose is. Every time you go to God to request a blessing, He will ask if you are ready to understand how these blessings will be used to influence both your life and the life of people around you. Why do you want that job? Why do you want to travel to that place? Why do you want that new car? There is no problem in enjoying good things in life. You just can't stop there. Take money, for instance. Money is not the problem. Love of money is. Money is a great servant, but a cruel master. What are you going to do with the money you are asking God to give you? In other words, when God puts an amount of money at your disposal, big or small, He does it for two reasons. First, to bless you, allowing you to use it to supply a need. Second, to make this money useful. Incredible as it may seem, even with all our faults, God puts money in our care because He knows we are in a responsible position to manage that money in a way to fulfill its purposes in God's kingdom. Whether you show yourself to be trustworthy or not, well, this is another conversation. Please understand this clearly. All the blessings that God gives you are legitimate. You need not feel ashamed that God has blessed you. Such gifts are allowed to be enjoyed by you and your family. There is no problem wishing to be blessed by God with material things. No. The big question is how these things will be used to benefit other people too. What is their purpose? Faith in God is perfect because it has a plan. Moses had a purposeful faith. The chances are that he initially thought he would be chosen and blessed by God simply to free a people who suffered the cruel oppression of an authoritarian regime. Well, that alone was a considerable accomplishment. But soon Moses learned that God wanted him to deliver his people to create a great nation. And then God went ahead and revealed to Moses the promised land idea. But that was not yet the final purpose. God did not just want to give a land to His people. He wanted to make them great and prosperous. But still, this was not God's final purpose. He wanted His people to prosper, to become faithful to Him. And incredible as it may seem, that was not yet God's final purpose. He wanted His people now in their own land, strong and prosperous and faithful, to finally be an example for all nations who then will see not only that God exists, but that He is within reach of everyone who desires a relationship with Him. That was the plan. Moses' faith had a definite purpose. He lived a blessed life under God's care. God's favor overcame his many problems. Moses enjoyed all the blessings from God without being contaminated by the disease of selfishness. Even though he enjoyed them, everything that happened in his life was directed by God to fulfill a much greater purpose. So it was with Moses. So it is with you today. What is the purpose of your faith? When you find the answer to this question, your faith will be perfect. And you will be able to enjoy all God's blessings while fulfilling the definite purpose of a faithful person, which is to give glory, honor, and praise to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. May our good Father in heaven bless you with faith and perfection in the biblical sense. May He give you courage and wisdom to understand He wants to fill your life with many blessings and use all of them for His glory, because this will change your life. All the best to you and your family. Bye now.